Okay, I'm just gonna make a Quizlet practice that. Nah, never again. Never again with Quizlet. I'll learn my lesson. No, you relied too much on the Quizlet. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. You were supposed to learn it to get the information stuck in your head, but you kept practicing over it and you weren't putting it into other stuff, basically missing out on the other information.
Yeah, I thought I knew everything because I understood the Quizlet.
Like the Quizlet, it's gonna help you get this down, but then you spent too much time perfecting it. Actually, got it down.
So I understood all of the Quizlet, not the actual thing. That was like.
Did she put in the lab yet or no?
I didn't check.
So you find a place in your lab talking about the cranial nerves. When it comes to the parts of the lab that are asking you to find this.
Did she post it?
So we're talking about lab 15, okay?
The one she does, I'm starting to cheat. The one she does,
When it
I'm
comes to
starting
the
to
parts
cheat.
of lab 15 that are asking you what function would be lost, that will be on you to figure out what that nerve is responsible for, and that's the function that will be lost. Okay, and your book kind of spells it out, what nerve, each nerve and what they're responsible for. Okay, and so look at these slides today. Okay, no? Here we go, cranial nerve. And the parameter that we travel through, so now we're talking about the 12 cranial nerves that exit the central nervous system at mainly along the brain stem. Okay, that's where we find the majority of their nuclei. Okay, where the cell bodies of the neurons that make these cranial nerves, where those are located, are the majority of the brain stem, and then their axons go out as the nerves that will travel to innervate muscles or to bring in sensory information from around the body. Okay, so we're gonna have two, so they're always a pair, one right and one left one. Most of them are mixed nerves, so that means they are bringing in sensory information from some part of the body and sending out motor commands to that same part of the body. Okie dokie. So, again, these are all gonna emerge at the brain, usually around the brain stem. We don't have any that emerge in the spinal cord, but we're gonna talk about one that kind of deep into cranial nerves that there's a lot of controversy over because where it actually originates. We number these 12 cranial nerves with Roman numerals. So we usually put CN1, CN2, via Roman numerals. Okay? And we will see them again. Roman in color represents, so here's a cranial nerve, the pair that makes up adducens. Then we have the facial nerve in green, and so forth. Again, they are paired, one on the right side, one on the left side. Right, so in yellow are our cranial nerves. You know, and we can see them at the actual brain. And the majority of them we find at the brain stem. Not that easy to make out on this. Neighbor limb is best I could for you, but kind of hard to find your way on that one. Okay, cranial nerve 1, the olfactory nerve. All about smell, straight sensory. No motor commands on this guy. Sensory, bringing in information about smell, originate. And note that all of our sensory branches of our cranial nerves are going to originate someplace out in the periphery. Okay, so not in the central nervous system at the brain or the brain stem, none of these at the spinal cord. But someplace out where it needs to, sensation needs to be picked up. Okay, so we call that the periphery. Someplace in the body that's not the brain and so forth. Okay, not the central nervous system. So the origin for the olfactory nerve is going to be at the olfactory epithelium that lines the superior nasal concha of the effluent. You remember that? So we haven't learned all those things for nothing. Now we're gonna draw back on all those places that we've learned, the foramina. Okay, because these cranial nerves are traveling to that, so we got to recall this information of the bones, that the skull, in the skull that we learned. So the superior nasal concha, we have lining that the respiratory epithelium, that we will see again when we do the respiratory system. So here is what we're talking about, right here. Superior nasal concha is where we have the tissue, the epithelium, the respiratory, olfactory epithelium, where we have the sensory receptors for the olfactory nerve, picking up smell. Okay, right there, that's the superior nasal concha of the ethmoid bone, covered with, you have it here, right? Covered with, is that it?
Where's it? In the thing.
Upside down, I can't do it. That's it.
It's not here, right?
And
No.
here's, right here, okay? Your book has a picture of this. Okay, this is the superior nasal concha of the ethmoid bone, covered with tissue, olfactory epithelium. And embedded in that tissue are the receptors for this cranial nerve, picking up smell. We'll talk about how that works when we get to those senses. And then that cranial nerve is going to the axons for that cranial nerve are going to travel. Actually, it's not the axons. It's the long dendrites of those of the olfactory nerve that end in the receptors at the epithelium. Those are going to travel back. Yeah, back might be the axon. Those are going to travel back all the way back up through the cribriform plate. Remember off the cribriform plate, inside of the skull with all those holes in it. All of these are going to be traveling up through those holes. Okay, all these branches coming in to bring that information, and they're going to head to synapse. That means release neurotransmitter on the next set of neurons that are at the olfactory bulbs. The cell bodies of these next set of neurons who are going to receive the information from the olfactory nerve are at the olfactory bulbs. Okay, and then their axons will travel back along the olfactory tracts and go to the regions of the cortex responsible for deciphering smell, figuring it out. Okay, so here we are. Here's the olfactory epithelium lining the superior nasal concha. We have the receptors for smell here that are embedded in this olfactory epithelium. The odorants come in and they have to get dissolved in what's liquid there. What is liquid in the nasal cavity? What liquid do we have there? Mucus. So odorants come in from our environment, chemicals, and they dissolve in the mucus. That's the only way we can smell it. They have to dissolve in liquid. The liquid that's there is mucus. And then they can bind to the receptors for odorants on the at the olfactory nerve that will travel up through the cribriform plate, on branches through the cribriform plate. All of the branches going through the cribriform plate, all of those branches going through all those little holes, that is the cranial nerve, or the olfactory nerve.
And if that gets damaged, you lose smell.
And you have, yes, you will not be able to see. We'll talk about that. So yes, this is the olfactory nerve, made up of all these branches, which are in sensory information about smell. Those will then synapse onto a whole other set of neurons whose cell bodies are here. And this is the olfactory bulb. And then their axons will travel back to the places in the cortex that are going to figure out what needs to be done regarding what we're smelling. We need to use some muscles to blood our nose, what are we doing? Or are we saying, that smells good, what are we doing in response? The brain will figure it out. So here, we don't see the, nerve for the olfactory nerve, but we do see the bulbs that are gonna, cell bodies are here, neurons, the second set of neurons that are gonna receive information from the olfactory nerve. They're gonna synapse, meaning the olfactory nerve is going to release neurotransmitter, and that's gonna then affect those neurons here, and their axons travel back on the olfactory tract. In animals that smell better than us, have a better sense of smell than us, their olfactory bulbs are much bigger than ours.
Wow.
So there we are, the cribriform plate, all this is where the branches of the olfactory nerve are traveling up through the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. Picture that with me?
Yeah.
Right. And lying right on top of the cribriform plate are those olfactory bulbs. Okie dokie, cranial nerve 2. And do we need to write anything? What do we need to do for the cranial? No, right? Okay. Cranial nerve 2, what about if something happens to it? No, no, that's for the plexus. Okay, cranial nerve 2 is the optic nerve. Okay, straight sensory, no motor commands leaving along this nerve, only sensory information coming in on this nerve. Okay, so that's we call afferent with an A. Afferent input coming in. That's compared to efferent with an E. Exiting, E exit. That's how I remember efferent. Just compared to afferent. Affecting, coming in and having an effect. Sensory, coming in about vision. And originating, so that means all the cell bodies for the optic nerve are at the retinas of our eyes. We'll get to those when we get to the, okay, after the spinal cord. Okay? And so the eyes are actually the part of the brain we can see. Our eyes are part of the brain, okay? And the retinas, we have
part of your brain,
cell
you touch
bodies
your
for the
brain.
neurons, whose axons all gathered together as the optic nerve, which is the cranial nerve 2. Okay? They pass through the optic canals of the sphenoid. You remember the ears of the bat? No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's where those are traveling through, okay? And when they travel back, they're going to partially cross over. And we'll see how that works. We're gonna get some crossing over between these axons from the left side and the right side. But then, once we do that crossing over, we'll then get the optic tracts, which are axons now that travel all the way back to the thalamus. And deliver that information. They're gonna synapse on the set of neurons at the thalamus. That means they're going to release the neurotransmitter. That's what that means, synapse. And affect the whole new set of neurons whose cell bodies are in the thalamus. And those neurons will send information on back. The thalamus is the relay center for sensory information coming in.
And that's the not 14.
That's your
Yo,
thalamus.
15, but that's part
Describe
14.
its
Isn't it?
function. Relay center for sensory information.
It's different in the book.
No, in the book it's
Okay.
different, but you get the idea. It's
All
part
the
of
way
that, right?
back along, projection fibers.
Numbers are different in the
Those
book.
that go up and spread
So
all the way
part
out
four.
along the cortex. Projection fibers, all the way back to the visual cortex. We talked about that. And the occipital lobe. Okay, so here we go. The way that information comes in, the retinas line the back or a layer of the eyeball. We'll talk about that. The retina is one layer of the eye, and it's composed of cell bodies of neurons. Those neurons, axons, all converge at one place. The place that we call our blind spot. Where we have a blind spot, that's where our optic nerve, we can't see in that spot, okay? And we call it our blind spot. Because the optic nerve is puncturing through. All the axons converge and puncture through. As the axons travel back, only the medial side, the axons coming from the medial side of both sides are going to cross. the axons on the lateral sides of both eyes are gonna continue back on the side that they're on. This allows the left eye, well, that's the right eye, is going to be able to pick up information from the right side of the room and the left side of the room. Okay, and vice versa for the left eye, will be able to pick up information from the left side of the room and the right side of the room. The right side of the room and the left side of the room. Okay, that's why we can see, right, we can close one eye and I still can see on both, all over the place. Okay, because of the chiasma, the crossing of axons, of tracks, fibers is another word we can call axons, running on this track, full of fibers running, half of the fibers cross on the medial sides. Okay, and that is called the optic chiasm.
Complex the human body is.
And then these tracks now run back to the thalamus. And at the thalamus, a particular nucleus in the thalamus, the lateral geniculate, we'll just say the thalamus. Okay? Now the thalamus is going to send that information along projection fibers all the way back to the occipital lobe. Okay, so here is the optic nerve traveling back, and the medial fibers cross at the chiasm. There's that occipital canal. Okay, from this view, looking into the bony orbit, you look down inside the skull, it's the ears of the back of the sphenoid. Cranial nerve 3, the oculomotor nerve, straight motor control. No sensory information on this one, only efferent, E exiting the central nervous system, going out to innervate muscles. Motor control, in particular the extraocular eye muscles that we covered. Which ones? Superior, inferior, and medial rectus. Remember those? Yeah. As well as inferior oblique and the muscle that lifts our eyelid, levator palpebrae superioris, the top eyelid. Okay, so these all get innervated by cranial nerve 3, which is the oculomotor nerve. Now, for motor control, motor neurons, they will originate in the central nervous system. Okay? So here they originate, that means their cell bodies. The cell bodies for the oculomotor nerve are at the midbrain. They're axons that converge and go through the superior orbital fissure and head out to those eye muscles. So here we are, the oculomotor nerve is here, originating at the midbrain. Okay. Cell bodies are in the midbrain. The axons run out through the superior orbital fissure of the bony orbit and go and innervate those muscles. Branch to innervate those muscles. Controlling the eyeball. There is the actual oculomotor nerve. Oh. Running through the superior orbital fissure to get to those muscles. Cranial nerve 4, the trochlear nerve. Motor control as well of one of the eye muscles, superior oblique. It also originates at the midbrain, the dorsal side of the midbrain, so the back part of the midbrain as compared to oculomotor that originates the ventral or the front side of the midbrain. So it travels also from the midbrain, its axons travel through the superior orbital fissure to go and innervate the superior oblique. Innervate means sprinkle some neurotransmitter in the synaptic cleft so that can then bind to the muscle and cause those sarcomeres to contract, to shorten. Okay. Here we are. Trochlear, all the way from the back side of the midbrain, traveling out. That's where the cell bodies of the neurons is, the cranial nerve is. The axons run through the superior orbital fissure and innervate superior oblique. And that's where he's traveling through to get the superior oblique. Cranial nerve 5, the trigeminal nerve. 3 branches, so it's like thick, like the largest cranial nerve has 3 branches. Its function is mixed, both sensory and motor. That means it's fibers coming in, carrying afferent sensory information, as well as fibers running out, efferent motor commands, okay? So it has 3 branches, the ophthalmic branch, that is bringing in sensation from the forehead, the eyelids, and the nose. The maxillary branch, bringing in sensation from the lower eyelid, upper lip, and the cheek. And the mandibular branch, sending out motor control to the muscles of mastication for chewing, like masseter. So we have these different origins because of these different branches. The origin for the ophthalmic and maxillary, which is sensory, is at the face. If it's sensory, it's gonna originate someplace out of the body and bring information in. The origin for the motor branch, the mandibular branch, is gonna be in the central nervous system, so at the pons, sending out motor commands. The passageway for the ophthalmic branch are places, and the maxillary and mandibular are places that we've learned. Superior orbital fissure, the bony orbit, the now foramen rotundum, and then foramen ovale. And their destinations for the ophthalmic and maxillary, bringing in sensory information. That sensory information is going to travel along those axons to the cell, to deliver neurotransmitter or a whole other set of neurons in the pons waiting. Okay, so we're bringing in sensory information to the pons. Those fibers ascend. That means they're coming into the central nervous system and traveling up.
So sensory
And
ascent,
then the mandibular branch, we're sending out
motor descent.
motor commands to the muscle
Motor
of
comes from brain to the
mastication on
sensory comes
fibers
from.
that are heading away from the central nervous system.
Which one is afferent and which one's efferent?
What?
Okay,
Which one is
there's
afferent and which one's
trigeminal
efferent?
and 3
Okay,
branches.
say the first 2 letters.
Mandibular,
Afferent.
sending out
Yeah.
motor commands to the
AF.
muscles of
AF.
mastication. The other
Afferent.
branches bringing in
Input coming
sensory
in.
information to the pons.
Afferent is input coming in. Efferent is input coming out.
There's trigeminal, the thickest cranial nerve.
So afferent is coming out.
When
So afferent is coming out sensory.
I see.
superior orbital fissure,
Efferent is no.
Afferent is
No, no, no,
coming
no, no.
in.
rotundum and
Oh,
ovale.
I read this wrong. Afferent is towards the central nervous system. Efferent, is away from the spinal. So sensory is afferent.
Next week,
Efferent
or
is
next
motor.
class, we're going to dissect some sheep brains.
We are?
Okay.
Finally!
Okay,
Sure.
cranial nerve 6 is abducens. The abducens nerve is motor. So that means we're motor control headed out to some muscles that control the eye. Okay, in particular, a muscle, lateral rectus. Okay, so originates at the pons, goes to the superior orbital fissure, and heads to lateral rectus. Motor control of lateral rectus. Lateral rectus is cut here. Yeah, there it is. So here's abducens. Lateral rectus is just cut right here. Innervate, lateral, innervate. That means it sprinkles neurotransmitter right near it. That goes and binds to the, the process, yeah? We wrote about that, I like that. Abducens, little thingy right there. Abducens passageway. Cranial nerve 7, the facial nerve. Motor nerve, okay, that has different branches. Okay, it's mixed sensory and motor, but its motor part, okay, has different branches. Okay, so mixed, we're bringing in sensation from the face, and for taste, gustation. Okay, so feeling at the face as well as taste. And then we're sending out motor commands to muscles of facial expressions. We covered those muscles. So we have origin for sensory branches at the taste buds. And then for sending out motor commands at the pons. That's where these, branches originate. They travel through, the internal acoustic meatus. Do you remember where that is? What bone is that on? The internal acoustic meatus. The temporal bone, good job. Temporal bone, right there, remember that petrous portion? Go on that plateau, go down the cliff. You saw the foramen down there, you pass the internal acoustic meatus. It will enter the internal acoustic meatus, and then it exits out of the stylomastoid foramen. Okay? It runs, sensory is coming into the pons, motor command are on efferent fibers running out from the pons to muscles of the facial expression. So here we are, the facial nerve. Branches coming in from the face, bringing in sensory information from the face and from the taste buds. The sensory branches, its motor commands are coming out and headed to the muscles, the facial expression. All right, so there's that internal acoustic meatus. So that cranial nerve runs through that internal acoustic meatus. Then it's gonna go down, out of the stylomastoid foramen to go where it needs to go. Cranial nerve 8, the vestibulocochlear nerve. This is all about balance and hearing. The vestibular branch is balance, the cochlear branch is hearing. This is mixed sensory and bonjour. This is sensory and motor mixed. Okay, so we have some muscles that are getting innervated by the motor branch. These are small muscles that help to maintain our posture. And we're bringing in information about hearing from the cochlea, which we'll get to when we get to the ear model. Cochlea is on that thing. Okay, so the origin are the receptors for hearing at the cochlea, deep within the petrous portion of the temporal bone. That's where we find our sensory receptors for hearing and balance, the vestibular branch. Okay? So the hearing receptors are there, they're going to bring in information, and then the branches that are more equilibrium, those receptors picking up. These are the receptors that pick up if we're going up and down in an elevator, okay, if we're spinning. So we're picking up all that information. They pass through that internal acoustic meatus and head to the pons, bringing in all that sensory information. So here's the cochlea in the inner ear, in the petrous portion of the temporal bone. And here's the vestibular part. That's all made of the semicircular canals. We're going to talk about those. Sensory information for hearing is headed in through the pons. Sensory information about posture and what our head is doing really is headed into the pons as well, so the body can tell what's going on. And there's this passageway. The internal acoustic meatus, cranial nerve 9, glossopharyngeal. Glosso, who are we talking about? Who are we talking about?
Tongue.
Tongue, something to do with the tongue, and the pharynx. All right, this is mixed sensory and motor, bringing in sensory information from the tongue, okay, about taste and or whatever else, and then sending out motor control for chewing, the muscles for deglutition, chewing, okay, swallowing. Mastication is chewing, swallowing, deglutition. Originating, the sensory branches originating at the back part of the tongue, and motor commands are originating at the medulla, oblongata. Passageways, jugular foramen. Sensory headed into the pons, those fibers are bringing in sensory information to cell bodies that are at the pons. Motor commands are sent out from cell bodies at the pons to the salivary glands. and the smooth muscle that makes up our salivary glands. And then our control of the muscles for swallowing. Now that's skeletal muscle. Okay, that's smooth muscle and skeletal muscle innervated by visceral organs, somatic the body, skeletal muscles, organ muscles, all innervated by glossopharyngeal. Cranial nerve 9. So there he is. And his branches going to where they need to go. Salivary glands, the tongue, and there's his passageway, jugular foramen. Cranial nerve 10, vagus. Vagus is interesting. It's the cranial nerve, the only one that extends past the head and the neck. Vagus goes to all of our organs, okay? Its function is both sensory and motor, bringing in sensory information from all of the organs, okay? So heartburn, that information is traveling on vagus. Trying to think, sometimes women have,
No, I don't think we need
but during menstruation, they can feel very faint, and have lots of trouble during that time, and that is vagus nerve really stimulated and can be bothersome for some women. And I'm gonna figure out the name of it. I have a student doing a project on it, I can't recall the name. And that my sister is actually affected by this. It's her vagus nerve that is thrombosun, very highly sensitive from organs, and then the parasympathetic motor control. So parasympathetic nervous system is a branch of our PNS, of the peripheral nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, controlling our organs. The parasympathetic is all about feed or breathe, okay? So it controls our urinary tract, our reproductive tract, as compared to the sympathetic. That's our fight or flight. That's gonna get us ready to either book from a bear, or stand and fight a bear. Should run, right? You don't know what to do with bears in front of me. But I play dead and pray. So parasympathetic is all about innervating our organs, okay? So it originates, the sensory receptors will find at the organs, at the taste buds, at the pharynx as well, which we'll learn about. And then the sensory commands are, the motor commands are headed out from cell bodies at the medulla. Okay, passageway is the jugular foramen, and sensory headed out, coming into the medulla, and motor commands on those fibers. Those fibers are headed out to the muscles all along the pharynx, and our palate, and at our organs, our respiration, the cardiovascular system, our digestive tract. Vagus travels. Vagus means wander, the vagabond, right? So Vagus is traveling everywhere, past, out of the head, past the neck, to all the organs, picking up all that sensory information, and as well innervating some muscles. Smooth muscle organs, jugular passageway, cranial nerve 11, accessory. This is the nerve that there's controversy over. Motor control of sternocleidomastoid, trapezius, some other muscles, and originates at the some of the rootlets of nerves that emerge from the spinal cord. And this is what makes accessory controversial, because our cranial nerves are supposed to originate someplace in the brain or brain stem, not in the spinal cord. But this one gets grouped into the cranial nerves, even though it originates at the spinal cord, because those rootlets converge together and actually head up through foramen magnum to then exit out of the skull. But they originate down at the spinal cord. So they enter the skull at foramen magnum and then exit out of jugular to head to the muscles that they're going to innervate. including sternocleidomastoid. So he gets grouped in as a cranial nerve. Accessory is like a ladder. And so we climb up from the spinal cord, up the neck, up through foramen magnum, and then out through the jugular foramen to go innervate muscles. Whereas foramen magnum comes up and then goes out jugular. Cranial nerve 10 or 12, the hypoglossal nerve. What do you think he travels through?
Tongue.
The tongue.
Well, yes.
Hypoglossal
The tongue
canal.
traveling through that hypoglossal canal, yes. So motor control of the tongue, or cell bodies are at the medulla oblongata. Axons converge to make the cranial nerve. That's strictly motor fibers that are exiting so they're
Thank God
effluent
the
to
blood
eat.
chapter is short.
And out from the central nervous
And it
system
senses
to
not
the
big.
periphery to go innervate the muscles of the tongue. Like who? Glossogenial styloglossus, hyoglossus, all of those muscles that move the tongue. Okay? And here he is headed out to the tongue through the hypoglossal canal, right? Traveling through the hypoglossal canal to those muscles. There's that hypoglossal canal. And the way that we can remember our cranial nerves is to touch and feel very good, velvet. The word, who's first? Olfactory, auditive, oculomotor, trigeminal,
What is it, guys?
juice,
Velvet.
vagus,
Bro.
cochlear, pharyngeal, vagus, Vegas, accessory, hypoglossal. Okay?
Velvet.
This is just, this is for you. This is just extra. I won't ask you the passage base. Okay? But if you wanna remember, you can remember this.
Come on,
I
fishy,
remember
fishy,
all
right on
that
fish.
if you want. I will not
Come on, fishy,
ask you
fishy,
the
fishy.
passage base. We've done the skull enough. Okay? 'Cause I think that's not even the end of it. There's more.
Oh my
That's not
God.
the end of the path.
It's a strike, it's a jump, jump, jump high.
So you have this picture, I believe, something like this in the manual, right? So you can, yeah,
When am I gonna jump off a bridge?
and you can use this picture just for yourself.
It's not that bad compared to
This
muscles.
is the picture that I would,
Muscles
put
is-
as patient. And
This is true.
point to one of them and ask you questions about it. Okay? I'll post it, it'll be on camera. You would not have to know these things on the models, that is not a good place to have to point that stuff out. We'll use this picture, okay, where it makes sense. Model that makes too much sense.
Use the cranial nerve.
So that means,
The brain for the
on
cranial
this,
nerves, they
you
really
should
is.
know the
Now we gotta remember
bulbs
this
and
stuff
the
now.
tract. So factory bulbs and tract, you should know the optic chiasm as well.
Optic chakana.
Knowing that these are the optic nerves, this is where they cross, the medial fiber. I will ask you, what crosses here? The medial fibers. If you tell me the optic nerve, that won't be right. It's the medial fibers of the optic nerve. cross
Medial
at
fibers.
the optic chiasm. And then run back on the optic tract. Okay? All right.
Okay, wait.
So,
We need to put what crosses in the optic chasm, right? Optic chasm.
Medial fibers of the optic nerve.
Medial what?
Fibers of the optic nerve.
Medial fiber.
Fibers of optic nerve. Fibers
Fibers.
of optic nerve. What do you need to know? What did I miss out? It's gonna be recorded.
Yeah, I just put it in the Discord just in case.
Okay, finish your quality time with the brain model.
So what crosses the optic
Go over the
chasm?
picture and your
This one?
manual about the cranial nerves.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Alright.
send around the sign-in sheet. And then come and check for our pre-lab for the 15th.